It's time for our first dangerous aside. This is when we stop to warn you about a real danger in the programming language. We've already said that no programming language is perfect, and we've seen some caveats in the JavaScript language. But a dangerous aside is where we're touching a subject that's so dangerous, where it's so easy to make a mistake, and it's so hard to track down, that you need to always avoid it. This dangerous aside has to do with syntax parsers in JavaScript and its automatic semicolon insertion. The syntax parser in JavaScript does something that tries to be helpful. You may have noticed that semicolons are optional in core JavaScript. You don't have to put a semicolon. So, why is this? Because the JavaScript engine does something for you. If it sees one character at a time, a certain statement, it knows what the language expects. It knows what the syntax should look like. So if it sees that you're finishing a line that is a carriage return. Now, a carriage return, that is when you hit enter on the keyboard, it's an invisible character, but it is a character. So the syntax parser sees it, knows what it is. And it says, hey, you're not allowed to go to the next line with this particular type of syntax, with this particular statement. So I'm going to go ahead and inject automatically a semicolon for you. So anywhere where the syntax parser expects that a semicolon would be, it will put one for you. That's why it's optional when you're typing it. Not because it's truly optional, but because the JavaScript engine is putting them where it thinks they should be if they're missing. Now that's all well and good. So rule 1 with this dangerous aside, you should always put your own semicolons, because you don't want the JavaScript engine to make that decision for you. You want to be certain that you are writing the code as it should be. But more than that, especially in the case of return, automatic semicolon insertion can cause a big problem in your code. So I'm going to create a simple function called getPerson, and it's just going to give me back a simple object. So I'm going to return, then I'll use object literal syntax to give me back an object, maybe first name. And it gives me back that person. That's simple enough. And then I'll call getPerson. I want to see what that value is, so I'll console.log it. Got that? So I run the function, and I output what it returns, which using object literal syntax should be a person with that first name. This object containing a first name, name value pair. Let's run it. Undefined. Why? Because of automatic semicolon insertion. The JavaScript engine, if it sees a carriage return after the keyword return, it will automatically insert a semicolon. So it essentially ran this code. Even though you wrote something else, the syntax parser chose to change your code. And so by putting this object literal syntax on a new line, it caused the JavaScript engine to decide to put in a semicolon. So it simply returned. It quit out of the function. And all that you got was an undefined result. To fix this, we have to tell the syntax parser what we're doing. We have to prevent it from doing automatic semicolon insertion, because as it goes character by character, instead of seeing a carriage return after this phrase, it sees a space and then a curly brace, and it knows that we've started an object literal syntax. And then it sees a carriage return, and that's okay. It doesn't automatically insert a semicolon in this case. So you may have noticed that I always put my curly braces on the same line as my functions and for loops and if statements. That's not always necessary, this is perfectly valid, but I do it so I never make this mistake. So that my muscle memory, the way I always write, just avoids this problem. So remember this. This is how, if you're going to return an object from a function, you need to type it. Otherwise, it won't work because of the syntax parser doing automatic semicolon insertion. And everywhere where you would expect to have a semicolon, you should put one to avoid this problem as much as possible. It's very dangerous and can be hard to track down. All right, let's move on.